Hi everybody, this is Mark with Beyond Profit, a global perspective, and today we're going to talk about globalization. Yes, that thing that many of our right-wing conspiracy people talk about and refer to as globalism, as if it's some sort of a conspiratorial global cabal. Well, there will be no cabals here in this video today, unless of course there really is. I don't know, maybe I'm part of the conspiracy. Look for the clues. Maybe I'm part of the Council on Foreign Relations. But I digress. In reality, we were referring to globalization as the integration of political, technological, cultural, and especially economic aspects of life around the world and how it makes us interdependent. Talk about NATO being a form of security integration. We talk about technology. Take this cell phone, call my friends in Ireland, and it's easy. I can even do a video call. Compared to 20, 30 years ago where I had a landline, it would cost me a fortune just to get a conversation in. We can even talk about forms of cultural integration, like how there's a taco truck on every corner or a Korean barbecue or something like that. I mean, that's pretty awesome. From an economic standpoint, we are talking about how trade makes us interdependent. And that's really going to be the main focus of what we're going to talk about here today. Now, we have talked about globalization before. We did a video on economic liberalism where it talks a lot about globalization. We've also talked about some of the challenges of interdependence before. But in the past, we've talked about what's great about it. And we'll do a little bit of a review on that, but ultimately, we're going to deconstruct it and start talking about some of the negatives of globalization. So, let's do it. Now, before we get started on the regular content of this video, I would like to thank you for watching this video. Please like, share, and subscribe. Thank you to my students for watching this. I know I'm making you watch this, but for the rest of you, I especially thank you. I really appreciate all the support that you offer to the channel here as well. So, we've already defined what globalization is. I was wondering what your thoughts were on it. Are you feeling pretty good about it? Like, feeling pretty good about NATO and taco trucks? Or are you feeling kind of down about it? Based on some of the things we're going to talk about here shortly, well, leave some comments below and let's carry on the conversation there. At this point, I want to revisit our talk about globalization, okay? So you remember last time we talked about globalization, we were talking about how great it was. Do we remember some of the awesome things about globalization?
We can get things like bananas.
Okay, we can get bananas. That's right. Can't make them in America,
Yeah,
so
we can get things that we would be able to grow on our own.
Yeah, absolutely. Things are cheaper, absolutely. By having an open environment where businesses can invest freely in different countries, right? It means that businesses can cut their costs and they can take advantage of low rates of all sorts of things, which means that it's delivering cheaper products back to the United States, a greater variety of products to the United States, more competition, which benefits the consumer, and so on. We also talked about globalization sort of on a security side. The idea that, like, look, if you have strong alliances with other countries based on economic transactions, then you're going to be less likely to want to fight each other. And the more you isolate yourself from these potential people, they tend to become rivals. It becomes unsafe. And so with globalization, the idea is that we're interdependent, right? And this interdependence has not just economic advantages, but security advantages. Why else do we love globalization? Yeah, love it. Yay. Since we have globalized the economy, our international growth rates in terms of the economy have just gone through the roof, right? Not just domestically, but like every country in the world who has taken part in it has benefited in terms of increased number of jobs, increased amount of profit, increased government revenue. I mean, across the board, it benefits everybody. And it exponentially benefits those people who are the bigger players. So like the richer ones, United States, the West, we benefit the most. You know, I know Donald Trump says otherwise. He's like, oh no, they're screwing us all the time. And there's an argument for why he might say that. Like, we can talk about that a little bit later. But by and large, this is all true. Lots of people don't like globalization. My question is this. If globalization is so awesome, why do people protest it? But some people seem to have problems with it. Why? They're just not very smart. They don't get it, right? Like, we get it. Like, we get it. And they don't get it. That's why. Okay. Well, that's why, right? I mean, maybe these people aren't stupid. Maybe they have legitimate reasons. Well, let's see. So let's talk about wages for just a second. That is one of these reasons, I think, why people are upset about globalization. If we are moving our operations and our factories to other parts of the world, then what happens to our workers over here?
May not have jobs.
Yeah. I mean, what that effectively means is that American workers' wages are competing with the wages of people in other parts of the world, just by virtue of the fact that companies can move around much more easily than under globalization. Multinational corporations exploiting the poor, right? So there is an argument for, if their cost of living is lower, then their wages might be lower. And there's a logic to that, right? If we're an international business and we want to move into another place and take advantage of those lower rates, you can get a living wage and have it not be the same as what a living wage is going to be in the United States. At the same time, what really tends to bother people is when people are genuinely being exploited. There are more slaves in the world today than there were at any point in history. And we Americans were sort of like, hey, we got rid of slavery a long time ago, right? Well, not everywhere in the world. We outsource our jobs to places where there's cheap labor, and they don't always have the best labor conditions, right? What's the word? Sweatshops, right? People working for very, very low wages under really horrible circumstances sometimes, and we just do it. There's no law that says we can't do it. It's happening in another country. We get away with it. What effect does globalization have on the environment? Capitalism creates a sort of demand. We want products. We have easy access to products. But in order to continue to get the products that we want, we sometimes have to sacrifice certain resources that are maybe important, but they don't sell as much. So we'll cut down rainforests. We'll destroy all sorts of land in order to create whatever this thing is that we want a lot of, that manufacturers then produce for us. So that's a side product of just a side effect of capitalism itself. Now, whether we do anything about that is another question, but that is the nature of things. If the almighty dollar and what we're willing to pay is the bottom line, then we're in trouble in terms of some of our resources. Why not just use them all up until we can't pay for them anymore? The more we consume, the more we pollute. In order to transport stuff, we got to use fuels. It's going to be fossil fuels usually. We could go on and on about just how our consumption just drives so much pollution. But here's another thing, right? So let's say we try to do something about it. Let's say we want to pass some environmental legislation, some regulations in the United States in order to try to prevent people from dumping poison into water. What might that company do? Outsource it, right? Why not just go to a country where they don't have those regulations and then dump your stuff in the stream? What happens if I decide to go off to China or if I go off to India? Am I going to be faced with those same standards? Not necessarily. So I may not be allowed to pollute in the United States, but I go to another country and pollute, put more stuff up in the atmosphere. Again, that's a transactional cost. You have to decide whether or not it's worth it for you to make that move, or whether it's worth it for you to stay there and follow the rules. But there's a lot of not following the rules going on. Maybe not following the rules, but trying to skirt the rules, trying to avoid that. Globalization is founded on this idea of free trade. And as we talked about when we talked about mercantilism, maybe not everything should be free traded all the time, right? Maybe there are some things worth protecting, and that's why we have certain protectionist policies. And maybe, especially when it comes to certain resources, we need to protect those resources. Like, we need to have access to food to eat. If we don't do that, then that could be a danger to us. So maybe not all of our ag policy needs to be based around the free market, right? Or we talked about with the military, that's probably not the kind of thing. We don't want to free trade weapons, okay? We want some control over some of those things. So what happens, we sell our American products throughout the world, and they start watching it because, of course, everybody loves Taylor Swift videos, and everybody loves whatever rom-coms we've got, or people love our porn. I don't know. We sell all sorts of junk all over the place. So it's good. I like Taylor Swift, right? The porn, I don't know about that. But, we sell all sorts of stuff all over the world. And then they look at it, they watch it. Do their cultures change because they have been absorbing this American culture? Can't believe I talked about porn in this class. It just popped out of my mouth.
Are you taping? Are you?
Yeah, I am. But I can always edit it out if I want to. But I don't think I will, though. I think it's still a great example. It's true. Our porn industry is absolutely huge in America, and you know we're selling it all over the world. What happens when, they're watching violent American television, or they're watching even Friends? People tend to take on American values, American attitudes, and sometimes that is, I don't know, it's not right to say to the detriment of their culture, but maybe to the weakening of their culture, okay? Like in India, this has been a huge deal, where the United States has come in and not just brought in their products, but has brought in loads and loads of jobs, which is really to one positive thing about globalization. It's meant that there's lots of Indians that have been raised out of poverty. A lot of these people are working customer service jobs, they're working tech jobs, they're working stuff that their parents couldn't imagine, and they're coming home with loads of money. And the parents are looking at them like, what's all this? When did you get so materialistic, right? When did you think it was okay to do fill in the blank? And so all the older people are like aghast at the behavior of the younger people, and the younger people are like, come on, get with the program. And it's not like they're consciously saying, oh, we just think America's better or whatever. It's just like they just start behaving that way because that's now part of their culture. It wasn't part of their culture before. Now, you could say there's some great things about American culture. There's great things about American values. But maybe there were some great things about some of those other cultures that are lost and may be lost forever, that goes away when, just as a result of the sort of trade and commerce. Cultural imperialism is a word that we often use to describe that. Take the EU, for example, right? We talked before about how it's got a common currency, it's got no tariffs between those countries, but the other thing is that labor can flow freely between all of those countries too. How would you feel if you're living in a country that is maybe one of the richer countries and one of the poorer countries where labor rates are a whole lot cheaper? They come over to your country because they can freely do that, and now they're competing with your labor pool. Or what if now we have open borders through the EU, some people with different religions or different skin colors or different whatever starts freaking people out. That's a lot of what's driving some of the craziness in America right now, is kind of fear of people who are different. And I'm not saying that's right, but I'm saying that contributes. Oh my gosh, what are they doing to my culture? Before I get to the punchline of this, I want to give you a little bit of a case study here. So you may have heard of Brexit. Can somebody tell me what Brexit is? Britain was part of the EU, but not completely. It still had its own currency, so it was not part of the euro. But other than that, it did allow its citizens to be European citizens. They could go get jobs anywhere they wanted to in Europe. The Europeans could come to Britain and get jobs in Britain, right? All that stuff was there. They all had common passports. They could go across lines really easily. No tariffs. All that stuff. Totally part of the free trade zone. And at one point, it was put to a referendum, and by 51%, they voted to get out of the EU. There's a whole bunch of people who were just like, this globalization, we've had enough of it, and we don't want it anymore. And it totally wrecked their economy. But besides that, it's an interesting question, because it's sort of like as a practical way of answering the question that we just talked about, and that is, if globalization is so great, then why would the Brits want out of it, right? So let's talk about those. First, sovereignty, okay? The British people felt that, as being part of the EU, that they lost some power. There is a European central government in Brussels that operates the EU, and all of these member states send representatives off to that European Parliament. And so they have a voice, but as a result of those policies that come out of the EU, that means that some of your national policies have to get in line with that now, right? So now my country is a little bit more like a state than it is like a country. And the Brits were like, I don't know if I feel 100% comfortable with that. And by the way, that's not most or all people. It was most on that day. I'm not sure it is anymore now after the aftermath. Some people believe that the money that was paid to Brussels would be better spent in the UK. Then there were immigration issues. Like I told you, there were no barriers. Areas that saw increases of over 200% in foreign-born population between 2001 and 2014 saw a majority of voters back leave, that is, get out of the euro, in 94% of cases. Isn't that crazy? I want to say that again. So if I live in a place in Britain and I get 200% of foreign-born people in here, then there's a 94% chance that I want to get out of the EU. So people coming in with their different ways and their different religions and their different cultures and their different skin colors, you move into those towns in Britain and they're like, We talked about autarky before, that's self-sufficiency, right? They felt vulnerable being interdependent with these other countries, and that forced that interdependence. They didn't want any of it. There were promised economic benefits. So in other words, like these right-wing politicians ran all around the country basically saying, if only we weren't part of the EU, then we'd be making all this money and our GDP would grow and we'd be able to negotiate individual deals with all these different countries. And that didn't happen. You know, they really have never come back again. The economic shock from like losing this massive common market was incredible. Demographics: white, older, socially conservative, less educated, supported Brexit. So I gotta tell you a story. I was walking through the streets of Oxford. This was long before Brexit. Brexit was like 2015 or something like that. And there was a dude standing on a street corner giving away these CDs. And he was performing, and these were first wave Eurosceptic songs, Richard G. Jeffrey, and over here it's like, keep our pounds, no euros, no kilos. He was upset about like going away from the English system and toward the metric system, but he was giving away these CDs for free. Some of these titles are amazing. Stand up for the pound. We don't want to move to the euro, we want to keep our pound. It's a recipe for anarchy. Flag of occupation, empire building. Flag of occupation is great. I will not bow down to your flag of occupation. English first, British second, European last. I mean, it's like it's all about identity. It's just a weird thing to try to explain to Americans. British people don't think they're European. Okay? Some do, like the ones who all love the EU, they're like, oh yeah, I'd be happy to be a European. But traditionally speaking, Britain does not see itself as part of Europe. If I look on a map, this is Europe up here and Britain sitting right there. And as far as I can tell, there it lies. But because of that English channel that goes between them and France, they really were physically separated for centuries from the rest of Europe. And anybody trying to conquer Britain, it had to be a big deal. Like it had to be like the Spanish Armada trying to do it, or the Vikings. The Vikings came over. Whereas Europe was sort of like they had their own wars, but they're mostly fighting each other. It's like the Brits trying to conquer the Scots or trying to conquer the Welsh or whatever, right? They were a conquering people. But they weren't part of Europe. They don't see themselves as part of Europe. They're different. They're special, kind of like we are. It's like we're not part of the rest of the world. We're Americans. We're different. We're special. We're exceptional. And so from an identity standpoint, a lot of them just never saw themselves as really European. And what's most important to a lot of people is being English first, and then British, and then European. Now you may say, well, why English and British, aren't they the same thing? They actually are not the same thing, okay? The United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland is kind of hard to see on this map here, but it's like all this green area is that, right? But it includes people who are Irish from Northern Ireland. It includes the Welsh. It includes the Cornish. It includes Cornish people live down here on this little southern tip, the southwestern tip. The Manx, a little tiny island between Ireland and Britain, the Scottish. All of these people have their own languages too. England is just one of many national identity groups in this island. They all were warring with each other for centuries. If you're English, it's like it is a distinct identity. It is something that's different from being Scottish, different from being Irish. If I go into Wales and I say, oh, it's so lovely here in England, somebody's going to correct me. This is not England, this is Wales. Now, so far, we have not been talking about labor very much in this class. We've been talking about money, and we've been talking about security and, protected trade and all this stuff, but we really haven't been talking about people very much, and that's going to change tonight. We're going to start talking more about people at this point. So if you want to know my opinion on globalization, personally, I'm still a little up on it. I'm digging my taco trucks and my NATO and all of the cheap products that I get internationally. However, you can't deny that there are some real and serious problems with globalization. And if we ignore them, just pretend they're not there, we're idiots. And actually, we're negligent to the people who it hurts, who it damages. So, as I've mentioned, there are loads of problems with globalization, and one of the biggest has to do with labor. Next, we are going to talk about the global capitalist system and how it turns labor into interchangeable widgets and creates global disparity. That leaves one big question that we're going to have to tackle as time goes on, and that is, how do we capitalize on the good parts of globalization while offsetting the negative ones, hopefully through different forms of policy? So that's the future discussion. Thanks for listening.